Welcome to the show about narcissism being the disease of our century. Today, we have an exciting episode that will challenge your perceptions and possibly change your life. Ilias Stasinos is with us. Welcome to our show. Today, we will be dealing with a topic as old as humanity, but just as relevant in our modern world. We'll uncover the demon within, exploring narcissism, its connection to what some would call satanic thinking, and how the ancient virtue of humility can be our most powerful weapon against these forces. So let's get started. Our first question comes from a listener named Alexander. She asks, "I've been in relationships where I felt like a pawn being manipulated. I just wanted to share love and connection, but I felt like the other person saw me as a tool to be used. Why is there such a disconnect?"
Alexander, you touched on something very interesting. That disconnect you feel. It's because the narcissist is playing a game all by himself. He doesn't care if you play with him or not. It's like two people trying to play completely different games on the same board. You play chess, thinking about strategy, cooperation, and long-term planning. But the narcissist is playing a game of solitaire, and you are just a card in his hand.
Can you explain to us why this disconnection occurs?
Alexander, narcissists operate from a completely different worldview than most people. While you enter a relationship looking for mutual love and support, they see relationships as arenas for control, dominance, and self-affirmation. The narcissist in relationships does not care at all about mutual feelings of support and love, but wants to feel in control and in power by exploiting his victim emotionally, financially, etc. He forces his victim to admire him and consider him superior. He avoids true emotional connection and personal responsibility by keeping an emotional distance and denying that he is to blame for anything. It's almost like they're wearing a mask of normal human interaction, but underneath is something darker. Narcissists in the early stages of a relationship may shower someone with affection and attention, but they are scheming with hidden agendas. Their actions are often carefully calculated to achieve maximum benefit for themselves, with subtle tactics such as gaslighting, etc., as when they engage in long-term manipulation, slowly working to isolate someone from their support network. And this is where it gets really interesting, and maybe a little creepy. This narcissistic worldview bears a striking resemblance to what many religious and spiritual traditions describe as satanic thinking.
Wow, that's a bold statement. Can you explain the connection?
Consider the story of Satan in the Christian tradition. What was Satan's great sin? The pride, the belief that he could be greater than God, the desire to build his throne higher than God. Now look at how narcissists operate. They believe they are superior to others, even when the reality clearly shows otherwise. They think they can fix other people's lives, even when their own lives are a mess.
So you're saying that narcissists are satanic?
Not exactly, but they operate from a similar playbook. It's all about pride, ego, the need for control and dominance. Whether we're talking about Satan's rebellion or the manipulation of a narcissist, we see a fundamental rejection of humility and an obsession with self-aggrandizement.
Exciting. But I can imagine that some of our listeners might feel a little overwhelmed. If you are in a relationship with someone like this, or if you recognize any of these traits in yourself, what can you do?
Here comes the good news, Maria. There is an antidote to this toxic mindset, and it has been known for thousands of years. It is a virtue that has been advocated by spiritual leaders, philosophers, and psychologists, and that virtue is humility.
Humility. This seems almost too simple.
But it's not simple at all, Maria. True humility is one of the most powerful forces in the human soul. It's like kryptonite for narcissism.
You mentioned that humility is like kryptonite for narcissism. Can you tell us more about it?
Gladly. You see, narcissism thrives on emotional involvement. It feeds on your reactions, your attempts to prove yourself, your desire to win the argument or gain the upper hand. But humility is completely out of this game.
So it's not about winning the battle, it's about refusing to fight on their terms? I mean, you need to not react and that's how you win.
Yes, that's right. Imagine you are dealing with a narcissist who is trying to challenge you, make you doubt yourself, draw you into his drama. If you react with anger, or try to prove him wrong, or try to make him see it or understand it rationally. You are playing his game. You are on his chessboard.
But with humility.
With humility, you calmly pick up the chessboard and put it aside. You say, I don't have to play this game. My worth is not determined by whether I win or lose.
Clever, but also very difficult. How can one practice this kind of humility?
You're right, it's hard, but it's also incredibly liberating. Let me give you an example. Imagine dealing with a narcissistic colleague who is always trying to outdo you, always implying that he knows better than you. The natural reaction is to defend yourself. List your accomplishments. Try to prove them wrong.
I can feel my blood pressure rising just thinking about it.
Exactly. But this is where humility is needed. Instead of getting involved, you could say something like, you might be right, I'm always learning and growing, and then continue your work.
But isn't that like letting them win?
That's the beautiful irony, Maria. By not playing their game, you've already won because you don't react emotionally. As we said, this is their game, to react emotionally with anger, etc. You have kept your cool. You haven't let them control your emotional state. And often that kind of response disarms them completely. They don't know what to do with this answer you give them.
It's like emotional judo. You use their power against them.
Excellent ratio. Yes, it's just like judo. You don't meet force with force. Redirect this energy and get out of the direction of negative energy.
Exciting. But I can hear some of our listeners thinking, great in theory, but how do I do that in real life? Especially if you're dealing with a narcissistic parent, or partner, or boss, someone you just can't get away from.
Good question. And it brings us to a critical point. Practicing humility does not mean becoming a doormat to be stepped on. It doesn't mean accepting abuse or staying in toxic situations. Sometimes the humblest thing you can do is set a firm boundary or walk away altogether.
Can you give us an example of how this could be done?
Of course, let's say you have a narcissistic parent who constantly criticizes your life choices. Humility is not accepting their criticism or trying to prove them wrong. It could be said something like this. Mom, Dad, I know you have strong opinions about my life. I appreciate that you care, but you have to understand that I am an adult, and I make my own decisions. If you can't respect that, I'm going to have to limit our conversations.
Very powerful. But I imagine it's not easy to do.
You are absolutely right, it is not easy. It requires a lot of inner work. You have to be grounded in your own worth, truly believe that you don't need their approval. And this is where spiritual practices can be incredibly helpful.
Spiritual practices? Like which ones?
So, remember how we talked about the connection between narcissism and satanic thinking? Many spiritual traditions have developed practices specifically for dealing with pride and cultivating humility. Meditation, prayer, self-reflection, all can help build this inner strength.
It's almost like building your spiritual immune system.
Yes, you are strengthening your spiritual immune system against the virus of narcissism and pride.
I want to touch on something that I'm sure many of our listeners struggle with. Dealing with a narcissist, especially over a long period of time, can leave you with feelings of anger, bitterness, maybe even a desire for revenge. How does humility help with these very human emotions?
You brought up something critical. Those feelings of anger and bitterness, they are completely normal. In fact, they are important signs that tell you something is wrong. But here's what happens. Holding on to that anger, imagining revenge, it's like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. When you hold on to bitterness, when you keep replaying the pain in your mind, you are actually keeping yourself trapped in the narcissist's world. You are still playing their game, even if they are no longer with you. Humility allows you to acknowledge pain without being consumed by it. It's like saying, yes, this happened. Yes, it hurt. But I don't have to let it define me. It is about liberation from the need for justification or revenge. Isn't that like letting them get away with it? It may seem that way at first, but to give you a different perspective, by letting them go, you are not doing it for them. You do it for yourself. You free yourself from the emotional chains that keep you bound to them. Thus you will maintain your peace of mind. Created by Elias Tesinos. Please like and subscribe if you found the video interesting. Also, there is another video about narcissism, Click on the icon to view it.